You're tuned in to the Gardening Simplified YouTube, podcast, and radio show, coming to you from Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's Stacy Hervella, me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Yes, folks, it's Adriana who makes this show blossom on your iPhones, iPads, computers, car radio, whatever it may be, and we thank you very much for listening and watching. Well, I don't like spiders and snakes, but that's not what it takes to love me, like I want to be loved by you. Words from Jim Stafford, that famous 1974 song that he wrote and released. 1974. I'm getting old. I can't believe it, Stacey.
You're telling me that's the year I was born.
Well, ask Jim Stafford, or you could ask Pat Wiggers. Pat Wiggers, a wonderful lady who stopped me this past weekend, said every week she never misses the Gardening Simplified show, watches it, listens to it, and Pat was really proud of the fact that Pat Wiggers, her name, the initials were PW.
PW.
And she liked that.
All
and
right.
I liked that too. What a nice lady. And she told me she had an incredible clematis in her backyard. She showed me a picture. And she said one day she was kind of working through that clematis with her hands and a big spider crawled out. She also had a snake in her yard. She had to call her husband, who picked up the snake and carried it off into the woods. Stacy, snakes and spiders are a reality in the garden. And I think what we have to remember is that they need three main things to survive: shelter, water, and food. And if the conditions are right, providing those three things, odds are you're going to see snakes and spiders in your garden.
Yeah, and you know that food part, that is the really crucial thing, because as much as people get a little bit freaked out when they see a spider or a snake, what these animals are eating in the garden, what attracts them, are things that are worse for plants.
Yes.
You know, the snakes and the spiders are totally benign for plants. They don't eat plants. They eat the things that eat and damage your plants.
Exactly.
So it's kind of one of those things where you don't want the cure to be worse than the poison.
Exactly. And the best long-term solution is habitat modification. If you have arachnophobia, is that what it's called?
That's what they say.
Or you don't like snakes. And personally, I don't like snakes. I really don't. They kind of creep me out. Now, I know that they're important in the whole biodiversity of our gardens and our landscapes, but I found a novel way to deal with snakes. I'm saving that for segment 4 today, the limerick. I'll teach you what I do when it comes to snakes. But you know, most snakes, they're afraid of you. They quickly slither away when your presence is known.
Yeah, I mean, here in North America, our snakes, we don't have a ton of very venomous or dangerous snakes. And even among those, they tend to be very reclusive, and they don't want to be, they just want to be out there, you know, chowing down mice and stuff, not messing with you.
So the key is eliminating low shade. I had a big snake in my garden a couple years ago. Boy, it freaked me out. But he was underneath a gigantic tomato plant.
Ooh, good
that
taste.
had foliage all the way down to the ground. And so it was cool. It was a great place to hide, hang out. So you've got to look for those areas of low shade or areas where they can quickly slither away, whether they're firewood piles or rock walls or whatever they may be. You're going to make it less hospitable to snakes if you there's no need for hysteria, so to speak. But the snakes eat insects and rodents. I mean, they are providing a benefit in the landscape.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have a really serious issue with voles and mice, especially if you have a lot of shrubs, hydrangeas. They love to eat hydrangea bark. And so in that case, learning to live with a snake is ultimately going to do you way more good than trying to eradicate the snake. But I get it. You know, I don't have a problem with snakes. I also have no snakes in my garden, so I can't speak to this necessarily from personal experience. But I like hiking, and I have certainly taken care of many gardens that did have snakes. And to me, me, I have no problem with their presence, but they do rattle me when I see them move.
Good one.
Oh, I didn't even.
I like that.
I do tend to get rattled if
You've
I
been
see
hanging
them
around
move.
me too much.
If I see a move, like if I see a snake like slither before I've identified that it's there, like I just have this sort of like primal reaction of like, oh my gosh, danger noodle, as they say. But I do like them, and I do definitely understand the benefit that they have to gardens.
So if I'm concerned and it's a time when there's a lot of snakes around, I'll carry a stick with me in the garden. You can kind of just rattle the bottoms of the bushes. I don't go in there barefoot. I make sure that I have shoes on. You want to keep grass mowed regularly, keep shrubs pruned or pulled away from the house. There are things you can do to deal with snakes. And then, of course, the notorious area underneath the deck, but that's where raccoons and possums and everybody else hangs out too. So you may want to seal off the lower portion of your deck. The snake repellents, I found that they don't work. They smell terrible, like mothballs. But I think it's more snake oil salesman stuff than it is. Look at the environment. As far as spiders are concerned, spiders, of course, are good website developers, right? I've got a lot of great spider puns. I'll let them go. You can look them up on the web. But the king and queen of garden predators are spiders. I personally love spiders. I love the silk web that they weave, their diversity, venom to paralyze their prey. Of course, you've got garden, black widow, brown recluse, wolf, crab, jumping spiders. But that's, I read somewhere that about 3 to 15% of people have arachnophobia.
Oh, that's pretty high.
Yeah. In the garden center the other day, a lady came up to me. She says, "Can you show me where the tarantulas are?" I'm like, "Tarantulas? We don't sell spiders." She says, "Yeah, tarantulas. Everybody's got them." So I walked her over to the succulents. She said, "Yeah, there they are, the tarantulas." I thought it was interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, she calls them tarantulas. Anyhow, the biggest benefit of garden spiders is that they eat insects, mostly the unwanted pests that you don't want in your flower beds, like wasps, beetles, mosquitoes, flies, mayflies. And tall plants help also attract spiders to your garden. I've found that sunflower plants are a great plant for attracting spiders to your garden.
So if you don't want to attract spiders to your garden, but I don't think that it's not easy to just sort of generalize about spider habitat, because they will, as you said at the beginning, they'll go anywhere where there's food. And as far as like making a home, they have many options. Not all garden spiders spin webs.
Exactly.
So, they're called orb weavers, the ones that make the beautiful sort of stereotypical spider web. But then there's hunting spiders like wolf spiders, and they don't need a tall plant. They're just going to be on the ground hunting around for, whatever they can find. The simple fact is, if there are insects in your garden, and there are insects in your garden, spiders are going to be there because that's a good food source for them.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the wolf spider. That thing is really spectacular. It's quite something to watch. And you're right, Stacy. A wolf spider, I believe, burrows down into the ground or has a little hole in the ground that it comes out of. So they're fascinating. And because of their size, wolf spiders can be kind of intimidating to people. But they're out there cleaning your landscape of some of the nasty insects that you contend with, and they do a pretty good job of it. Have you heard of the Barrow spiders?
Oh, yeah. Lots of people freaking out about these.
Yeah. These are spiders that are native to Asia, made their way to the U.S. in recent years, and they feel they're going to infiltrate more states in 2024. They use a method called ballooning, spinning that web. They get caught in the wind, and they travel and they move. They have a natural mechanism called ballooning. But Barrow spiders have been confirmed in Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee, West Virginia, and Maryland, and they figure it's going to continue to move north. So familiarize yourself with this spider. Again, a spider using venom to paralyze their prey. not necessarily to cause injury to you. And spiders are just like the snakes. They really don't want to hang out with you, and many times will just scurry away when your presence is felt.
Right. And, a spider's venom is intended to paralyze prey. It's not like they are malicious creatures that just are like, oh, who can I go around and bite today? They want to save, it takes energy, first of all, and they want to save that venom for doing what counts, which is feeding themselves. So, I understand people's fear of spiders. I think it very much connects to the primal fear that I was talking about with snakes and seeing them move. And there certainly are many areas of the world where spiders can be extremely dangerous and extremely harmful. North America just isn't really one of them.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you do see snakes or spiders in your garden or landscape, it's an indication, and frogs, bats, that there is good biodiversity there, and odds are you do have a healthy landscape. We'll see how Stacy ties in snakes in Plants on Trial. That's coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where the order of the day is spiders and snakes. And, I think that if you do have a fear of either of these animals, or really anything in your garden or in life when it comes to animals, the best thing you can do is to take the IPM approach, which is to say, learn everything that you can about the animal. And then that helps you understand their behavior. That helps you better understand, what the issues are and what you can do, what you can change in your garden to make it less friendly for them. And like you said, that's going to be shelter, that's going to be water, and that's going to mostly be food.
Correct.
So you can't always, stop certainly insects from being in your garden. But for example, if you do have snakes, that could indicate that you really have a bigger issue with voles, with mice, with moles, with any number of small mammals. Chipmunks is another good one. And in that case, you could look at trying to control those, maybe modifying the habit to make it less friendly for those, rather than trying to modify the habit to be less friendly for the snake, because that's going to be a much taller order. If there is food there, they are going to be there. And this is why I've said it on the show multiple times. If you have spiders in your house, you need to be a lot more concerned about what they're eating than the spiders themselves, because there is something in your house that is making it hospitable enough for the spider to be well fed and happy in your home.
Well said. Exactly. Right on.
So
you got it.
Do your research. It really helps. And it's kind of like the old, proverb to know your enemy. And I'm not saying they are enemies or that the right approach is to think of them as your enemy. But the more you learn, the more you can do to, better make your environment less friendly. And it just seems a lot less scary.
I use a unique IPM approach that I use myself. We'll share it with you in segment 4. In the business, we call this a radio tease. So
all right.
Continue.
I am eager to hear it myself. So I did not, you said before, I can't wait to hear how Stacy ties this into snakes, and I didn't. Yeah. I'm not tying today's Plan on Trial into snakes. If I could have thought of a way to do that, I would have, but I am tying it into spiders.
All right.
So, there are all sorts, if you look online, all sorts of websites and things telling you 10 plants that you can plant to repel spiders. Right. And that's all based on myth and superstition. Mm-hmm. It made me laugh because one of the plants that kept coming up in these articles was lavender.
Oh.
Now, of course, lavender has a strong fragrance. Mm-hmm. But you know what lavender also has? A flower that attracts a ton of insects.
A lot of insects.
Like a lot, full of nectar. So
that blows that theory.
If you're planting lavender in the hopes of deterring spiders, it's not going to work because all you're in this long, they bloom fairly long, about a month. So in that period, you're going to have bees and flies and moths and butterflies and all these things that spiders are going after. So, that kind of mentality of like, 10 plants to repel spiders, it almost makes these plants out like they are spider kryptonite. Like, they can't cross the lavender line.
Right.
And that's just not how it works. Spiders do have somewhat of a sense of smell. It's not like our sense of smell. It's sort of just helping them distinguish between, the things that they encounter. But they're not like, whoa, lavender, better leave, And so many of these sites do kind of imply that is the case.
Spiders just view it as clickbait on the World Wide Web. They ignore it. You should too.
Yeah. And again, whenever you see these things, you do have to like ask yourself, is this a reputable source? And when I search for plants that repel spiders with the command site.edu, because that will limit your results to just university websites. So you know everything is reputable and reliable, not just, some person just posting stuff online to get clicks. Not a single site said that these plants would repel spiders. And if in the off chance, maybe essential oils or something might have a chance, it's only going to be indoors. It's not going to work outside. I mean, the outside is it's just too big. So you have to, if you want to deter spiders in your garden, you have to deter insects. You have to deter their prey. And that, of course, is easier said than done because, as we all know, plants and insects go hand in hand. That is nature's way. But what you can do is to plant things that are less attractive to insects, and maybe that will prevent the spiders from taking up residence in your garden. And so my example of this, if you're thinking like, well, what are you talking about? Just like ornamental grasses or pines or something with no flowers. No, I'm talking about a mophead hydrangea.
Really?
Yes, specifically Gatsby Moon mophead oak leaf hydrangea.
Now, why would that be?
Okay, so people are familiar with the concept that there are that there are mophead and lace cap hydrangeas.
Right.
So lace cap hydrangeas have two different floret types. They have a sterile floret, which is the one that you see that's real showy. That's what most people think of when they think of a hydrangea flower. They're seeing the sterile florets. And then they have the fertile florets, which are small, they're star-like, and those are full of pollen and nectar, everything that an insect, a pollinating insect, would want. Now, in nature, most hydrangeas are inherently lace cap because they exist for the pollen and nectar so that they can set seed and reproduce and keep that hydrangea population going. Well, along comes humans and they're all like, hey, these sterile florets are pretty. I want more of them. And so they breed plants selectively and they've developed mophead versions. And in a mophead hydrangea, and this is true of any type of hydrangea because mophead and lace cap aren't specific types of hydrangea. They are specific types of hydrangea flowers. So an oak leaf hydrangea can be a mophead. A smooth hydrangea can be a mophead, paniculatas, all of them can be either or. So in these mophead, when the sterile florets far, far outnumber those fertile florets, pollinators can't get to them.
Now that's interesting. And, a programming note here, I know Stacy and she loves insects. She knows a lot about insects. She enjoys attracting insects to her yard. So in this case, you're just kind of painting a scenario for someone who maybe has arachnophobia and doesn't want as many spiders in their yard.
Right. So arachnophobia, if you don't want as many spiders, a lot of people are allergic to bees. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are just plain afraid of bees. Mm-hmm. And so planting mophead hydrangeas can be an effective strategy if you want to reduce, if you still have hydrangeas, you still want summer color and all of that, it can be an effective way to reduce pollinating insects in your garden. Now, that is not something I personally would want to do or would recommend, but I understand not everybody is me. And so I wanted to speak about Gatsby Moon oak leaf hydrangea specifically as today's plant on trial, because generally speaking, oak leaf hydrangeas as North American native shrubs are very pollinator friendly. Mm-hmm. So I have Gatsby pink in my garden. They've grown tall enough that the deer can't eat them. So I do get some flowers, which is awesome. But yeah, they are pollinator magnets when they are in flower. They're fragrant. They're just covered in those fertile florets. And so, yeah, I get bees. I see all sorts of really interesting insects. And that, again, especially those orb weaving spiders, they set up and they say, hey, this is a hot spot for insects. Exactly. I'm gonna weave a web right here. And I've got a front row seat to the, buffet. So when you have these plants that don't attract those pollinating insects, the spider's just going to go elsewhere to where there is better fixins, as it were. So the Gatsby Moon as a mophead oak leaf hydrangea, which is not that common. Most oak leaf hydrangeas are lace cap. The flowers are big and full. And when you see one of these flowers, and if you see it at a garden center or at a garden or something, you just try to get in there. They're so densely packed in the inflorescence that you can't even hardly separate them with your hands to get down to those fertile florets. And so neither can the insects. I mean, if it's hard enough to do with your fingers, imagine how hard it would be for a little bee trying to get in there. It's not worth the effort. There's other things that it can do. So it's a good choice in that way. And it's still a beautiful plant. And, I always recommend oak leaf hydrangeas as one of my all-time favorites because in my opinion, they are the true 4-season hydrangea.
They are.
A lot of other hydrangeas, they just don't look that great in winter. A lot of them don't have fall color, whereas the oak leaf hydrangea has these beautiful oak-shaped leaves that come out with fuzzy white growth on them in spring, flowering, just starting to flower here in Michigan right now in late June. And then the flowers persist through summer. In fall, amazing fall color, beautiful burgundy, red.
Stacy, for a deciduous plant to have 4 seasons of interest, that's pretty special.
Yeah, and especially for a hydrangea. Then in winter, you get the beautiful peeling bark. So it's kind of like a having your cake and eating it too kind of plant. Now, it's not to say that you won't get any insects, because I have seen some really interesting wool carder bees on my oak leaf hydrangeas that harvest the fluff for their nests. So that's always a fun thing to see. So, I mean, it's impossible to have a plant without some insects. But again, you can do these things, make these choices of, having a mop head versus a lace cap to try to reduce the insects and to hopefully in turn reduce the spiders. Or, like I said at the beginning, another alternative is just to learn everything you can, try to make peace with them, and carry a stick. It works for the spiders and it works for the snakes. So you can kind of, go ahead and clear the path,
softly,
as it were.
Carry a big stick. Yes.
And scare the spiders and snakes. But even if you aren't concerned about insects, Gatsby Moon is a beautiful addition to your hydrangea collection. It really is very, very unique. There just aren't a lot of those big, full mop heads that you see, especially when it comes to oak leaf, even though they're way more popular in the big leaf and the mountain hydrangeas. You just don't see them much with the oak leaf.
It's true. And boy, it gets my stump of approval. That is a gorgeous plant.
So Gatsby Moon Oak Leaf Hydrangea is hardy from USDA Zones 5, heat tolerant to USDA Zone 9, 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. So this is a bigger plant, but if you have a large spot in your garden, you can't do much better than this beautiful native oak leaf hydrangea. Look for it at your local garden center, or of course you can visit us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com to find all the details and a link to find a local retailer if you are so inclined. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we've got the garden mailbag, so please stay tuned. Greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where it's, in my opinion, the best time of the show, because I love knowing what's going on out there. I know what's going on in my garden. I know what's going on in the trial gardens here around Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs, but I don't know what's going on in your garden. So I love reading people's questions, and especially your garden celebrations and your garden quandaries and conundrums, so we can help you resolve them. So if you have a garden quandary, conundrum, or celebration, we would love to hear from you too. Gardeningsimplifiedonair.com is our website. There's a contact form there, and you can reach out to us there with your pictures and tell us what's going on, because it's a busy time in the garden. And when we get into hydrangea season, which for some people have already started if you live in a warmer climate, that's when the questions really start rolling in. So I believe that our first question today is, in fact, a hydrangea question.
Yes, it is. Tina writes to us, I would love a blue hydrangea for my garden. My current, that's got to be one of the most desired colors plants
hands
for
down.
a garden, hands down. My current macrophylla is pink despite my adding loads of soil acidifier. Will the Blue Jangles variety remain blue even in my assuming higher pH soil? Thanks.
Okay, so great question, Tina. I'm going to try to answer this as quickly and clearly as I can. So it is. There's a big fact of confusion out there with hydrangeas changing their flower color. So first of all, as Tina points out, only Hydrangea macrophylla, which is also known as big leaf hydrangea, florist hydrangea, will change their flower color based on soil chemistry. Other flowers, other hydrangeas will not. This is unique to this species of hydrangea. And the color change does not happen solely based on soil pH. A lot of people think that if it's in acidic soil, it'll be blue. If it's in basic or alkaline or neutral soil, it'll be pink. But that's not actually the whole story.
Agreed.
Because you do need it to be acidic for blue and alkaline for pink or red, but you also need aluminum in the soil. And aluminum is a naturally occurring soil mineral, but it's more present in clay soils than in sandy soils. So here out in West Michigan, our hydrangeas definitely tend more to the pink and red. Our soil is neutral to acidic, but because it's so sandy out here, we just don't have the aluminum to get that blue color. Now, to compound matters, the majority of color change products that are out there on the market to change the color of your hydrangea are simply soil acidifiers. So they will make your soil more acid, but if the issue with your hydrangea color change is that it doesn't have aluminum, they will do nothing. And so you'll keep applying it and applying it and applying it and making your soil more and more acidic without ever getting the color change that you were hoping to get.
Oh, very true. And Stacy, in the garden center industry, I remember selling some product in a bright blue package, and it was called aluminum sulfate.
Yes.
Is that something we're looking
Yes,
for?
aluminum's right there in the name.
You got it. I figured that, but I thought I'd take a shot at it.
You need aluminum sulfate. Now, I would not encourage you to just go out there and apply stuff willy-nilly. This is a great opportunity to get a soil test and find out what's really going on. But if you have been applying a soil acidifier and it's not giving you results, then chances are the aluminum is the issue, and you are going to want to put down aluminum sulfate instead of just the soil acidifier. And then that will add the aluminum ions that need to be there for the chemical reaction to take place, for the flowers to turn blue. Now, so that tells you what you need. But now, as for the variety, Let's Dance Blue Jangles, which is indeed a Proven Winners color choice variety, not every hydrangea is equally able to go from blue to pink to purple and morph through those color changes. The more red a hydrangea has in it inherently, the less likely it will be to go blue. So when we put blue in the name of one of our hydrangea varieties, what that means is that it will go blue more easily. If conditions are right, it will be blue. But that if the conditions are right is still important. So yes, blue jangles will be blue in acidic soil that contains aluminum. But if you have, a soil that doesn't contain aluminum or it's not acidic, it won't be blue. That's just the way that it is. But it's to signify that it can if conditions are right. But that those conditions are really, really crucial. So, Tina, I would say since you have been applying acidifier, I would just switch to aluminum sulfate. Make sure that you are reading those directions very carefully. An over application of aluminum sulfate can actually be very toxic for plants, so you don't want that to happen. And you also need to be patient, because typically what needs to happen is that the aluminum sulfate needs to be present when the flower buds are being made, not just when it blooms. So it's not like you're going to be able to put aluminum sulfate down and then come out in a week and surprise, it's blue. You might see a little color change, but for those like deep, rich, true blues that most people are after, It's going to take some time, and you're going to need to keep applying it over the course of time. And you will, if you want to have a blue hydrangea, you'll need to do it in perpetuity, because your soil will just go back to its natural conditions without it.
So Tina and Blue Jangles, we have our eye on you. Did you get that?
I did. I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good too. Right,
I feel very positive about that.
I like it. All right, let's continue on here. Thanks for the note, Tina. Roger writes to us, I have a semi-dwarf peach tree that I got on Mother's Day. Since then, it's been going downhill. I've been watering. Other than adding compost dirt around it and a layer of wood chips over the top, I have added no other fertilizers. And Roger sends us a picture. And Stacy, I took a look at that picture. One thing I want to note right off the bat is something I see often, and that is the tree is staked with a stake that they use in the nursery industry to ship these trees, but it's not the proper way to stake a tree. So it's right up next to the trunk. So I would pull that stake off initially. It's not causing your problem, but I recommend pulling that stake off and getting that tree staked appropriately. What I saw in the picture, Stacy, I commonly see with peaches. My personal opinion is it's peach scab. Do you agree or disagree with me?
I don't know that I disagree, but I also, what I'm seeing in this plant is just general stress.
Okay.
And, a plant, when a plant goes from the grower, which you just bought this recently, as recently as May, goes from the grower, it goes to the garden center, it makes a dramatic change in the conditions that it's experiencing. And the leaves that a plant makes under a more shaded or protected environment are different than the leaves that it's going to need when it's out in full sun and wind and all of that. And so that's what a lot of people will see happen after they plant something out in the full sun, out in the wind, and the plant is just like, the leaves don't have the right type of chlorophyll in them. And so a lot of times the plant will really struggle. And that's what I feel like I'm seeing here is leaf scorch from the sun. But it absolutely could be a fungus. I mean, peach trees are of all fruit trees you can grow at home, the most notorious for all the crazy diseases that they can get.
Notorious. And if it's not peach scab, and I would understand that, the important thing here is if you're irrigating, don't be irrigating over the top and soaking that foliage or wet foliage into the evening hours, because that's when you're going to start getting those diseases.
Yeah. So here's what I would recommend. Take that stake out. Like Rick said, it's not really doing any good, and it could cause the bark to get, injured and leave an opening there. I would definitely scratch up the mulch so that water can penetrate a little bit better. It looks fairly matted down, and that can become hydrophobic or make it difficult for water to reach the roots. And then I would just continue to care for it as you have been. I would be hopeful that in the next couple weeks, the foliage that emerges is going to be adapted to the outdoors and be just fine. But just to be on the safe side, when autumn comes and the plant drops its foliage, make sure you clean all that up and discard it. Don't compost it. Just throw it away. And that way, any fungal spores that are on it will be hauled away and less likely to harm your plant. But I don't think you have any huge cause for concern. I'm not seeing wilting. I'm not seeing water stress. I'm just seeing a plant that's a little like, whoa, I've been through some crazy stuff lately.
Jillian writes to us, bonjour, Rick and Stacy. I love that. I always had that phrase I've used through the years, bonjour manure. My mom has been dealing with this ground cover for years. She sends us a picture. Thank you, Jillian. A friend from my childhood gave it to her. It seems to be spreading by runners and does not want to take leaf of the area. By spraying, cutting, or pulling, can you identify what this plant is? How best to eliminate it? Thank you very much. She also mentions, I enjoy listening to the show while with my horse. I'd love for it to be longer, especially the details section of the plants on trial segment. And Stacy, looking at that picture, you nailed it right off the bat.
Yes, I did. And I was laughing about this, Jillian, because this is a plant that just last episode, Rick was talking about this plant and he said, I do not recommend that you plant this. Is when we were talking about plants that undergo color changes. It is chameleon plant known as Hunia. And yeah, it is a nightmare. Honestly, it's, I don't know if you could call this person a friend. I'm sure they were well-intentioned.
Permanent fixture now.
It is one of the worst weeds, most aggressive ground covers and worst weeds to try to deal with in the garden, because it does spread by runners, and those runners are really thin and really fragile. And so you try to pull it out, and any little piece of those runners still in the soil is just going to cause the plant to come back.
Propagate it.
So probably the easiest way to control this is, if possible, make the soil drier. They cannot deal with dry soil. They love moist, wet conditions. So if you have an irrigation system or other ways that this area is being watered, try cutting back on that. That's not going to take care of it, but that can certainly help it spread less aggressively. It is even hard if you're willing to use an herbicide on it. It's hard to control with an herbicide because it's really, really waxy. If you are going to try it, I have found that more of a 2,4-D based herbicide works better than a glyphosate herbicide on those plants where it's hard for things to stick. But if you are going to try it, I would actually try it in spring before that waxy coating develops, because then you should be able to get better contact, and hopefully it's going to take repeated applications. This is one of those weeds that you can't just say, okay, I weeded and I'm good. It's going to take many seasons of concerted effort, and I would say a variety of techniques to try to control it.
Karma chameleon.
Yes,
right?
Also known as chameleon plant, although yours, for some reason, is all green instead of colorful, so you're not even getting color. You just have this obnoxious weed. So we'll put some resources for you on the show notes at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. We got to take a break. When we come back, we've got branching news.
Welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show. It's time for branching news. And Stacy, I threw this story in this week for branching news. A very nice lady by the name of Neri Brown was visiting the Walmart in Pineville, Louisiana last week when she found an unexpected item in her shopping cart. Right where she normally stows her kids in the cart, there was a venomous snake.
Yikes.
Yes, this has made the rounds on Facebook, her Facebook post, that she didn't even see the snake at first. Another customer pointed it out to her. She says she's grateful. She took her kids to daycare instead of to the store with her. The snake appears to be a juvenile cottonmouth snake.
Wow.
Yikes. And that brings up the point I mentioned in the first segment, my IPM approach.
They didn't say how it got there?
No, they didn't.
Like she just looked down in her cart and all of a sudden cottonmouth?
I'm going to guess that the cart was probably out in the parking lot. And then when they collected it up, it kind of coiled up inside.
All right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
There you have it.
Surprise. Free snake with every purchase.
Like I said, hysteria at the Walmart. So there you go. Gave her quite a fright. It would me too. So my IPM approach for dealing with snakes, me personally, is this. I'll give it to you in the form this week of a limerick. And that is, how do I proceed with a level of class? With reptiles, I'll take a pass. I'm not much of a snake charmer. As a matter of fact, I wear armor when faced with a snake in the grass. Snakes aren't for everyone, so not to be outdone. When faced with a slithering serpent or any other intruding insurgent, I've trained myself to run. And boy, Stacy, can I run fast.
I know you can. So running is always an option.
That's my IPM approach to dealing with snakes in the garden. I've taught myself how to run very
perhaps the impact of your feet on the earth will make the snake go away on its own.
There you go. I probably scare the snake away too that way. Hey, this is a fabulous story. I love this. This is right in my wheelhouse. And again, any of these stories, we post them to gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. That's our website. You'll find links there and links to stories, information, pictures. So make sure to visit gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. A mechanic has built the fastest wheelbarrow in the world in his garage. Dylan Phillips has modified the wheelbarrow to fit an engine and a sled so it can hit a top speed of more than 50 miles per hour.
Wow.
You heard that right. A wheelbarrow that's faster than 50 miles per hour. After 2 years of tinkering, Phillips, who's 38 years old, has claimed a spot in the Guinness Book of World Records after the wheelbarrow reached an average of 52.58 miles per hour and a high speed of 56.82 miles per hour. The previous record, held by Kevin Nix, was 44.6 miles per hour. He just did it for fun. The video is fun to watch. The story's fun. And kudos to him. I consider him a true entrepreneur. Dylan Phillips, the world's fastest wheelbarrow.
Well, so I'm taking it this is not a wheelbarrow that you stand behind and propel.
He sits behind it.
He does. Okay, so
he made a little sled and he sits
okay,
behind
God, that's the sled part. Okay, because
he doesn't run behind it.
Okay. I could have used that when I was installing all my mulch a few weeks ago. 50 miles an hour would have been helpful.
How about a story to close out today's show? NVIDIA is a company led by CEO Jensen Huang. He says a Japanese gardener taught him one of the most profound learnings of his life, and it's why he can be on top of every detail of his $3.2 trillion chip giant. I mean, amazing. Jensen is known in Silicon Valley for his meticulous attention to detail, and it was a chance encounter with a Japanese gardener that helped the CEO realize he has the time to be a perfectionist. Instead of racing to the next project, he used to work in one of their overseas offices. He learned this lesson while on vacation with his family. He was in Kyoto, Japan, at the Silver Temple and the Moss Garden. And they visited. He said it was suffocatingly hot and humid, sticky. Heat is radiating from the ground. And along with the other tourists, they wandered through this meticulously groomed moss garden. He noticed a lone gardener. Now remember, this moss garden is gigantic, and it's exquisitely maintained. He noticed a lone gardener squatting, carefully picking at the moss with a bamboo tweezer and putting it into a bamboo basket. Now, he thought that, what in the world is going on here? He walks up to him and he says, "What are you doing?" He says, and the gardener says, "I'm picking dead moss. I'm taking care of my garden." Now, Jensen said, "But your garden is so big." And the gardener responded, "I've cared for my garden for 25 years. I have plenty of time." Now that's really, really something, because Jensen Huang has 26,000 employees, and he now feels that he has the capacity to support them, that he's not too busy for them. He used this in a graduation address, and I thought that was really neat. The impact that this gardener at that moss garden had on this CEO and his work. He was meticulous.
Yeah, I have been to Japan, and I've actually been to that garden. And yeah, you see in any garden that you go to in the Kyoto area, you will see gardeners, crouching down and weeding areas with tweezers. It is definitely an exercise in care and in patience. But, I feel like gardening is so poignant like that. I mean, have you ever read the book Being There by Jerzy Kosinski?
I have not.
Yeah, or seen the movie? Very much like the gardener comes out with all these life insights that completely change the financial world. Now, speaking of gardening in the financial world, I was watching financial TV a couple days ago, and I saw this thing, and it said, so-and-so will now move to whatever company after a period of gardening leave. And I stood right up.
Leave.
I said, gardening leave? Is this a real thing? But my instinct said no. My instinct said no, this person did not take leave to work on their garden. As lovely as that would be, and as much as I was thinking, well, gee, I could take some gardening leave. No, it turns out gardening leave is a term for when someone leaves a company but is under a non-disclosure because they have a big project that's going to be, coming out. So the company still pays them, but they don't have to work. And that is in financial sector and probably tech as well, known as gardening leave.
Wow, I'd like that gig.
I know. So whether this person actually did any gardening on their gardening leave, I don't know. But I was extremely disappointed to find out it was not, in fact, a leave dedicated to horticulture.
That's great. You could add that to your investment portfolio, right? Very good. Hey, real quickly, you know how much I dislike garden hoses.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So I was happy to see this story. A homeowner uses his garden hose to save his house from serious fire damage. It happened last week in Fargo, North Dakota. A Fargo homeowner's quick actions potentially saved his home from significant damage. A fire started on his deck, was spreading to his home. By the time the fire department got there, he had put it out with the garden hose. So garden hoses, they have a reputation of getting kinky and you trip on them, and hoses frustrate me. But in this case, this homeowner used his garden hose to do a good thing. He did the work before the firefighters got there and saved his home. I thought that was a good feel-good story.
It is a feel-good story. I'm just shocked that he didn't have any kinks in the hose, that it wasn't all knotted up, and that he was able to, quickly turn on the water and deliver it where it needed to be, because that does not seem, it didn't get caught on the edge of the bed while he's trying to go put out the fire.
That would happen to me.
Exactly. So I'm glad that everything worked out well, and that for once garden hoses did not live up to their frustrating reputation.
There you go. Thanks for watching and listening to the Gardening Simplified Show. Remember, we are a podcast, YouTube show, and radio show. You can get more information at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com, and we'd love to have you send pictures and notes. We always love to hear from you. Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Adriana, and thanks to you for making the Gardening Simplified Show part of your weekly habit. Take care.